Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the 11th PIBC Peer Learning Network webinar. This is the final one of the year, and we have an action-packed agenda today. I am Raymond Kan, PIBC's Director of Research and Policy, and I'll be the moderator. First off, I want to acknowledge that I am hosting this webinar in the downtown Vancouver, located on the unceded and traditional lands of the Tsleil-Waututh, Musqueam, and Squamish peoples. And I ask you to take the opportunity to reflect about your understanding of reconciliation from wherever you are joining us today. Thank you. We have over 430 registrations for this webinar. Thank you very much for your patronage. We've been averaging about 260 attendees per webinar this year, and I think we're likely to match or beat that average today. I also like to remind everyone that the Peer Learning Network, or PLN as we like to call it, is funded by a generous contribution from the government of BC, and PIBC is solely responsible for designing and delivering the PLN program. In our last webinar in November, we had the BC Nonprofit Housing Association, Metro Vancouver, and Entre Nous Femmes Housing Society talk about all things affordable housing and community housing. It was a day right before the federal budget was released. Well, since that time, a lot has happened. Obviously, there's been a lot of punditry about the housing measures in the federal budget. There's also been a lot of activity in BC. Specifically, local governments are busy completing their updates to their OCPs and zoning bylaws. In the legislature, Bill M216, Professional Reliance Act, was also introduced. That purports to be about speeding up the delivery of housing. And I'll have more to say about that matter later in the webinar. And then speaking of activities, I live in Vancouver, and I do see a lot of redevelopment taking place in my neighborhood. Single detached homes being redeveloped into duplexes and sometimes even fourplexes. And it was just 2 years ago, almost to the day, that Bill 44, small-scale multi-unit housing was enacted. While things are happening in pockets here and there in communities across the province, things are probably not happening at the pace and scale that was hoped for by some of the sponsors and drafters of Bill 44. But on that note, we're happy to convene a really, I think, wonderful panel today to tell us the story about missing middle housing, specifically the federal and provincial housing design catalogs, and also the realities on the ground in terms of getting more of these missing middle housing built. So I'm now going to ask our panelists to turn on their cameras. Right on cue. Thank you, everyone. So today we have Dan Weiner from Small Housing BC, Cleo Corbett from CMHC, and Cleo also serves on the PIBC board as a director. We have Kevin Harding from the BC Ministry of Housing and Municipal Affairs, Bryn Davidson from Lanefab Design Build, and our resident builder today, and Guy Patterson from Young Anderson, our reliable resident lawyer. And if you haven't done so, please browse our speakers' bios on the PIBC webinar registration page. So we have on tap 3 presentations today, followed by what I'm calling a practitioner's perspectives and panel dialogue. Then we'll get into the audience questions. And thank you everyone for submitting questions in advance. That's super helpful for the panel. And I'll also monitor the chat box for any additional and relevant questions. And then finally, this webinar is being recorded and will be posted on PIBC's YouTube channel by Friday of this week. So I'm going to invite Dan to start us off right by giving us a refresher on the overall context for missing middle housing, followed by presentations by Cleo and Kevin.
All right, everything coming up there well for everybody? Technology still works? Fantastic. Raymond, thank you for having me. It's awesome to share this stage, this digital stage with so many awesome people in the gentle density and missing middle space. I've got 10 minutes to work through 15 slides, so buckle up. We're going fast. And I apologize for my fast talking in advance. So my name is Dan Weiner. I am the co-executive lead alongside my peer Tamara White for small housing. I focus on industry activation, and that means getting shovels in the ground and getting more of this product built. where tomorrow focuses on policy adoption and ways we can advocate to make gentle density easier from a legislative process at municipal, provincial, and federal levels of government. So we do consulting, bylaw assessments. We have an infill boost program, a prefab ready program, but essentially we work across a spectrum of industry actors to make multiplex development more feasible and easier to build to address our housing crisis. When we're talking about gentle density, those on this call likely know, we're talking about buildings that are typically Part 9, generally, except for townhomes, they don't include land assemblies. So fourplexes, primarily where I'm at in Kelowna, but also duplexes, triplexes, lock-off suites, row homes, and the like. Why we believe that gentle density is one of the most pragmatic solutions to our housing crisis? Well, number one, Canadians like it. In polling that we have run, as well as Abacus, Canadians agree that not enough attainable and affordable housing is getting built. And not only that, they don't want to see this housing stock pause or stall at the benefit of non-market housing. So we need to find a way to balance both housing options to restore home ownership. Many Canadians are willing to compromise on what home ownership looks like for them in terms of size, as long as it means that it's ground oriented, they have a backyard or a front yard to have a coffee, let a pet out, enjoy the neighborhood and the streetscape. But they still see home ownership as that source of a secure, long-term financial viability for retirement and well into their later years. We also see the second highest level of support for this type of housing across all British Columbians. So the single family home, of course, is still the standard that everybody wants. But next to that, 83% of British Columbians support small-scale multi-unit housing, compared to about 48% for high-rises. And for the planners in the room, please feel free to share this polling data with your mayors and councils as they get into election season. I'm happy to share our Leger polling data with you. From an industry side, we need this housing fast. More of our construction workers are retiring. We're seeing a gray wave in our trades. Our prices have gone up both due to the COVID crisis and supply shortages, as well as our friends and their tariff unpredictability to the south. We have become less productive and more inefficient. It takes more people to build a home than ever before. And as you've seen from recent CMHC reports, our productivity in residential housing construction has generally stagnated. But summarized, British Columbia must double its housing production while navigating rising costs, stricter building codes, step code, carbon code, and an aging trades talent pool. We have 2,800 builders that are licensed across British Columbia, and it's not going to be just the Anthems and the Polygons of the world that build us out of the housing crisis. It's going to be many small actors becoming developer lights and growing their business that will eventually restore housing affordability, make housing more attainable, and actually grow our economy as well. So we need to figure out how we employ a scattered site approach and get many actors working together. But when we start to look at the opportunity, at first it feels a little bit cumbersome, but we are a little bit more optimistic. So according to CMHC, there is about a 22,000 unit to supply affordability gap that must be closed on an annual basis. And at the same time, people like Bryn will tell you there's over 855,000 single family lots across British Columbia. And within these lots, according to census data, about 42% of British Columbian homeowners are mortgage free. So congratulations to the homeowners across British Columbia. You have won the BC land lottery. Now we need to figure out how to make this land more efficient. And this includes, seniors who may want to age in place and stay in their community, but may not want to navigate stairs. It may include generational housing or intergenerational housing. It may include workforce housing, but there's plenty of opportunity here. When we talk about the economic opportunity and talking with our friends over at SmallWorks, we estimate that there's about $1.3 trillion in land value that is currently locked in single family residential lands. And it's figuring out how we unlock the economic potential of this land to make a significant dent in our housing affordability struggles, so that eventually British Columbians my age and younger can have the chance to call themselves home owners and not just forever renters. So when we look at these numbers, 866,000 lots, we need 22,000 units annually to restore balance to our housing affordability gap. That actually amounts to less than 1% of our single family housing stock that needs to be redeveloped on an annual basis. And when you look at redevelopment numbers, the target tends to sit around 1%. So if we could achieve this through fourplexes, we can actually get to housing affordability much quicker than I think any of us can anticipate. And really, it's about creating the incentives, the levers, and the policy tools that will enable us to get there, of which the standardized designs are a critical piece. Why we love the standardized designs, and of course, they're not without their challenges. We'll talk about that too. But one, they can reduce construction timelines, and it returns us to a World War II post-war boom of housing where we're ordering a kit of parts and assembling on site. As they become more accepted and more adopted by a wider range of builders, they can offer more cost predictability and cost certainty. Largely, our residential home sector is in a cost plus model. This would allow them to convert to a fixed price model of deployment, which will eventually lower costs over time, allow prefab manufacturers to scale as well. And while some complain about a cookie cutter or little boxes on the hillside type of aesthetic, the fact of the matter is between both the BC government and CMHC, there's a variety of models, a variety of modalities in which they can be applied, and ultimately a variety of finishes that can be applied to these houses to make them look different and unique within each community's context. Beyond that, when we think about how it's practical to implement, besides the townhome solutions, there's no land assemblies required. If municipalities are supportive of them, there shouldn't be any variance permits, which means we can get shovels in the ground faster. With tools like the seismic and lateral load tools that are being developed through things like the BC Permitting Hub, there should be lesser of a requirement for professional services like engineering when we think about seismic code. And as mentioned, with 2,800 builders across the province, it allows us to access a wider talent pool to deploy to this type of housing. With standardized designs, you get less risk, you get more scale. From a lending perspective, you get more predictability and more certainty. So it's fantastic for risk mitigation, which makes it easier to fund and finance. However, there are some things that are needed for me, and I'm excited to hear Cleo and Kevin get into it a little bit today. We want to know more about the clarity on the roles of CRPs and who's signing off on these designs to enable them to get to building permit. We need to see industry incentivization, and ideally at the municipal level. So development cost charges being charged at the lot level, maybe instead of the per unit level, would be a fantastic way to incentivize small scale multi-unit housing development in communities like theoretically Kelowna. We need to, where possible, look at ways we can standardize regulations regionally. And I know every planner will tell us their community is a unique and special snowflake. But if you can tell me why your community needs unique setbacks, unique FAR, and unique parking requirements that could not possibly be the same within your region, I would love to learn more about why that is the case. The more we can standardize this across the province, the easier it is to deploy standardized designs and prefab solutions. Without standardized regulations, you can't get standardized housing. We need clear guidance, checklists, and plain language. As mentioned at the beginning, builders are being asked to scale up and kind of become developer lights. So the more municipalities can kind of guide and be a facilitator rather than a gatekeeper to enable the first gentle density projects, the easier it's going to be to implement this as a solution going forward. This is all about risk mitigation for the next 12 to 18 months. If you want to learn more about some of our stuff, we're going to give the stage to the other experts here, but we have a guide that we've written in partnership with CMHC on how you can implement gentle density with some great case studies that we've discovered and talked about across Canada. If you want to learn more about small housing and some of the work that we're doing for engagement, here's some great QR codes you can scan now or in the recorded session after the fact. And lastly, if you're planners that want to see this type of housing built in your community and you're wondering why your permits have stalled, we are now also offering free training for builders in partnership with the Government of British Columbia through their Workforce Innovation Training Fund. So if you're interested in bringing this training beyond December 11th and 12th to your communities, please send me a message and reach out. I'll drop my LinkedIn in the chat. That's it for me for a speed run on standardized designs. Raymond, back to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Dan. And you kept it to 10 minutes precisely. You are Mr. TikTok. All right. Thank you, Dan, for setting the context and the stage for the next two presentations about standardized designs. Cleo, over to you to talk about the Federal Housing Design Catalog.
Okay, great. Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Gayla Kesla. It's good to be here today, and thanks, Dan, for setting the stage for us on the tremendous opportunity that is gentle density and the opportunity in our communities and existing neighborhoods for housing. So I'm going to spend the next 15 minutes giving an overview of the catalog, what's included in the housing design catalog, how it works, our local partner program, and then a test case feasibility and massing study that we did with the City of Vancouver to bring the catalog to life. So Dan mentioned this. Catalogs are not a new housing solution. In fact, the original catalogs developed by CMHC way back in the day in the 1940s still provide housing in many of our communities across Canada. Known as Victory Homes as a post-war solution, Strawberry Box Homes. Many people still live in these homes today. When I worked in Vernon, we had a neighborhood called East Hill, and we called them the 100 homes because there were 100 of them, and people loved them. And a fun fact, two of our team members who worked on the catalog actually live in these homes, which is great. But we needed to reimagine this housing solution for today's context. So today's catalog responds to this opportunity that exists in our communities. It encourages infill, climate action, combats sprawl, and a more efficient use of infrastructure, as well as in neighborhoods that have access to services, amenities, and are places where people want to live or stay, whether you've grown up there or you've raised your family there. Many people across Canada can't afford single detached homes. So how do we look at infill and housing solutions that respond to the diverse needs of our community? So that's what the new catalog aims to do. It has 4 different typologies, and it's meant to be a housing solution for homeowners, developers, builders, and local governments. And I will just say that initiatives like Bill 44 and the small scale multi unit housing legislation in BC and the Housing Accelerator Fund have really changed the regulation and policy landscape in low density areas to enable more housing choices and enable a solution like this to come forward, which I think is really promising. And I know that the planners in this virtual room, many of you and us have been advocating for these kind of changes for a really long time. So it's really great to see. So the catalog itself is 50 designs across 7 chapters of Canada. So the priorities for developing the catalog were to be regionally informed, adaptable by design, respond to climate concerns, energy performance, and also look at financial feasibility. I will briefly go through each of those. So these core principles, first of all, the regionally informed. Turtle Island is a really big place with numerous different climate zones, adaptations of the national code, different lot sizes, and different approaches to zoning. So we looked at all of these things and worked with local designers who were experts in their region so that they could respond to housing needs, variation in climate, and also regional form and character preferences. So really interesting process. We also knew that accessibility was going to be an important priority for the catalog and for putting this next generation of homes across Canada. So we did work with Accessibility Standards Canada, and I am happy to say that 37 of the 50 designs have at least one unit that is accessible. And there are options as well. So accessible ready units that can be easily converted in the future, or enhanced accessible units. And as it says there, this responds to CSA standards as well as national code standards. Energy performance and climate, we all know that this is really important. And so all of these designs exceed building code minimums. And as well, there are choices that people can make if they want to go above and beyond that. There is life cycle analysis provided so that you can understand embodied carbon in potential projects, as well as materials guide and a climate resilience guide for users and for qualified professionals to help bring these to permit. And then financial feasibility. So not only was kind of simple floor plans, spans, and different things like that looked at in relation to cost, but also Class B cost estimates are provided for each chapter of the catalog. They are provided in ranges because, of course, if you are building in Burnie or Terrace or Vancouver or Campbell River, those costs are going to look a lot different. So there are ranges given. So how does this work? We have provided technical drawings to be as near permit ready as we can without having a site. So we coin these as siteless designs. End users will need to work with a qualified professional to do anything related to the site, such as servicing details, access, site planning with a qualified professional to bring these plans to building permit submission. And you can see there's a list of things that that local government may require. But that being said, we worked with a lot of communities, local governments to pre-review these designs to really get them as close to permit ready as we could. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a sec. But what's included in the catalog? So full technical packages, architectural engineering, as well as all of the templates and guidance that I talked about, resource guides, as well as regional site plan examples are coming out. And that's more to support those homeowner developers. And then check out the website. There's a lot of different resources offered there. When we were developing this catalog in consultation with numerous interest holders, industry told us very clearly, we have standardized designs. There are standardized designs and programs out there, but unless you have all levels of government working together and support from the jurisdiction that will permit these homes and having support at the local level, it will be hard to make this work. So we took that feedback. We worked with a number of communities. You can see the current list there. These communities have all pre-reviewed the designs. They have indicated which designs out of the regional chapters they support for development in their community. And this is done through a zoning compliance review, as well as building officials reviewing the plans. And they have committed to a streamlined fast track process for standardized designs to get them to building permit as soon as possible. So this is anything from streamlined development permit and building permit processes, or exempting these designs from a development permit process, that kind of thing. And I'm happy to say that this list grows every week. We are about to add a number of new communities to this list. And I know that there are a number of communities on this call today who I may have already reached out to, but if you're interested in being a local partner, we would really love that opportunity, and I encourage you to contact me or the catalog email, which I'll share at the end, to explore this further. I'm going to give a quick example to just bring these homes to life a little bit. Vancouver did a number of zoning changes in 2023, which enhanced a lot of their zoning for missing middle, multiplex, and small scale housing in a number of different neighborhoods. Vancouver was one of our communities that pre-reviewed the designs, and they are one of our local partners. And I work with them on a number of different things. And they said, hey, we have this site. It's challenging for us. It's a sloped site. Usually when we develop housing, it's going to be higher density, but it just doesn't fit in this context and with existing zoning. Do you want to work together and do a bit of a test case on the catalog homes? So this was a great opportunity. We co-funded this feasibility study. So what you see here is kind of a custom standard build on the site that would look to maximize density under existing zoning. So there were 12 units that were 1-bedroom units and 4 units that were 2-bedroom units. So 16 units in total, but quite costly because you would have to build underground parking, that kind of thing. And the site is challenging, it's sloped. So when you compare that with testing catalog homes, and you can see here in the number of different options that they used, they mixed and matched. And I would encourage anybody who's interested to do that. I've seen people mixing duplexes with accessory dwelling units, or repeating the rows in a townhouse kind of configuration with 5 facing 5 as an example. But this example, the architects who did this work for us said, wow, it was great to have the catalog homes because it really jump-started the process of how we could look at what density and what opportunities could exist on this site. So the design, or the option that kind of wins out, is doing 3 fourplexes on the site. There would be surface parking, but that gives 12 units total, with a number of family size units. So although it's less density than that custom small apartment, the floor area is relatively similar. The costing is lower for the build. And also, I would say that, to Dan's point, it's that ground-oriented housing that people really enjoy living in. So we also were able to test the fourplex designs, which are front to back, and disconnect the front to the back half a story to work with the slope. So it tested that for us as well. Yeah, and so this is just a great example of where things are looking promising for the use of the catalog in this potential project. So we'll see where that goes. And I think that is it for my time. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I am excited to hear from my colleague Kevin. I just want to say that, as I said, all levels of government working together to provide housing solutions is really how we have impact together and collaboratively. And when we say support standardized designs and processes, we're not just talking about our catalog. We would love to see you promote the BC catalog or local standardized designs because we do see this as an important way forward. So thanks so much, Gayla Kessler, and back to you, Ray.
Thank you, Cleo. Well said. Thank you for showcasing the federal government's efforts to enable more housing across the country. I think that's the proper mindset we all need to have. And I think I'm old enough to remember what a momentous occasion it was back in 2017 when the federal government launched the first ever national housing strategy. So this is really good progress. Alrighty, next up we have Kevin. Your turn to showcase the provincial housing designs catalog.
Great. Thanks so much, Raymond. And I'm going to start by just echoing something that Cleo ended with. Of course, I've suddenly just lost my actual visibility on where everyone goes. So I'm just going to trust that you can see me. Raymond, can you see my screen just fine?
I can, yes.
Okay, hooray. I'm going to echo what Cleo just said at the end, which is any one of these catalogs are what we're interested in. We're excited and thrilled to see the opportunity for standardized design catalogs of all shapes and flavors to be adopted across the province. And it's always a pleasure presenting with Cleo and her team from CMHC because a lot of times they say a lot of things that I wanted to say and I don't have to repeat them. It's efficiency, maybe even standardized in a different way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk folks through a little bit about our intent and our goals behind the standardized design program that we launched in British Columbia, tell you a little bit about the work that I'm doing, and talk a little bit about where we want to go from here. But the key message really is that our goal now is to support uptake of standardized designs where they make sense, and see what we can do about easing and supporting implementation in a bunch of different ways. So to start that off, just tell you a little bit about myself. My name's Kevin. I'm Director, Innovation and Safety Policy in the Building Governance and Innovations Division in the Partnerships Developments Branch in the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing. That's a lot of words. I work alongside colleagues in planning and land use management, and I work alongside colleagues in construction standards and digital solutions. So a little bit of context about where I sit, and I get to work on fun projects like the Affordable Housing Initiative, worked on reforming the building code to allow for things like single egress stair building designs, and I helped with the final stages of our standardized design catalog launch. I get to work across the full spectrum of housing, from construction standards to financing. So as I'm seeing questions come up in the chat about uptake and financing and tenure and ownership, all of these things are things that get the exciting parts of my brain really just running and thinking about how we can partner, support, and collaborate. In terms of the context, I think that Dan did a really great job of an overview of the context in which the province was operating when it launched the standardized design catalog. We went to procurement and we came up with what we came up with. We're living in a housing crisis. People like me, my age group, a lot of times housing ownership or secured tenure of any kind feels like a pipe dream. Unaffordability is a real problem. Unattainability in terms of ownership is a challenge. We have to think about how we respond to the climate that we know is changing around us. And at the same time, we know that financial and economic pressures are dramatically impacting ability to build housing in our cities and across the province, timeliness in terms of getting construction projects going, and all of that adds up to costs. It's a not quite virtuous cycle, it's a vicious cycle from time to time. And we thought that it was time, given these pressures and challenges, to take action to try to help address them wherever we could. Now, taking action sometimes means that we share the load in terms of work, and I know that the legislative work that's been undertaken in recent years has added a lot of work to everyone's plate, but it's work that we're happy to see get going. We've engaged in legislative amendments to support upzoning across the province, so that way multi-unit housing could be built in more places than it used to be able to be permitted. We've created opportunities for transit-oriented development to support densification in ranges around transit and bus stations. And we're even diving into conversations around off-site prefab. The new popular term from the federal government is modern methods of construction. So these are things that we're starting to launch into, where legislative action is being taken, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. One of the things that we heard, though, is that as we're saying across the province that OCPs and zoning plans need to be revised to support multiplexes and ADUs, is it wasn't really clear on how to do it. And so the ministry felt that procuring standardized designs would help demonstrate the potential of our SMU guidelines and SMU zoning. It would provide easily replicable, scalable designs. It could catalyze discussions about offsite and prefab housing. And if we got into the zone of speeding up issuance of permits, we could reduce the holding costs of land as it waits to be developed and reduce the cost pressures that are adding to, as people have said in the chat, are not a temporary crisis, but a systemic problem that needs to be addressed. Perhaps in the comedic side, we also talked about whether or not we could just create a whole Vancouver Special 2.0. And so that's what we attempted to do. It's always thrilling to see catalogs that inspired us and that we helped catalyze, and seeing the catalog that CMHC has developed with really 10 impressive designs that add vibrancy for multiplexes and ADUs in different places. I'm just going to drag the PDF catalog onto the screen so that way you can see in the middle here the standardized designs that the province of BC procured. They're a little bit different. They're a building blocks approach. If you page through this catalog or even download the Revit files that are available through the province's website, you'll see that they're broken out in terms of different floor plans and different building blocks for different types of dwelling units and different types of homes that can be assembled in different ways. This adds a little bit of complexity compared to the CMHC designs. The anticipation here is that a qualified professional, like a designer or something, not necessarily an architect, can pick up these designs, configure them for what a homeowner or a landowner or a small scale or a medium scale developer is looking for, into designs that can be submitted to local governments for permitting. The designs themselves have multiple facings and sizes and orientations, so that way you can do duplexes and multiplexes and multiple site comparisons and things like that. And they include in the catalog and in the data that comes with them an opportunity for really just countless variants. As a side note, it was fun. We asked to procure 10 standardized designs, and we actually had to go back and forth with the architects who did this work to actually build out 10 discrete designs, because they told us that the building blocks approach could give an unlimited amount of variations. The catalog includes information around a Class D costing analysis. The designs comply to step 4 of the energy step code. They assume a climate zone, I believe, somewhere around the middle of the province, so that way it's not disposed towards the lower mainland or the far north, but it has a range of applicability. I note, though, that of course the designs don't include the fixation to the ground or the foundation, and so there is some work that needs to be done. And we know that adds a little bit of complication, and we're working to see what we can do about supporting implementation in various places. But our goal really was to catalyze some of these discussions and provide examples of standardized designs that could be rapidly implemented. And like Cleo has highlighted, we've heard from local governments and builders that there's existing standardized designs that work in some places that they've got already. And our key message really is, if there's existing design catalogs, if there's other catalogs, we've started this conversation and we're looking for ways to support it as they go. Other key assumptions, as I see come up in the chat, we assume sort of a 30-foot lot. That doesn't work in all local governments. I know we had to pick something in the middle. It was a bit of a fun adventure trying to figure out where we could go, because much like where we hear from some local governments that the building blocks are too wide to fit in their lots, we hear from others that lots are too wide to efficiently use the building blocks. It's a fun Goldilocks problem, but we're hoping to pre-start some of these conversations. What I wanted to do, though, is after briefly introducing the catalog, reminding people that you can download that marketing brochure that gives an overview of the blocks and the alignment, compare it to CMHC's catalog. We think that the designs slot well in next to each other. We don't believe that there's any overlap. We don't think that there's duplication. We think that they're additive. They add to the range of selections that are available. I wanted to talk a little bit about what's next in terms of where we're going with standardized designs. Up front, I think the key thing that I want to highlight is that it's the process now. We've identified that there are standardized designs that could be implemented in local governments to support rapid development and rapid construction. We're now looking at how we can support improving processes to support the standardization. Essentially the question is, we have standardized designs, whether they're BC's, whether they're CMHC's, whether they're Kelowna's, whether they're somebody else's. Let's start with standardized designs and then identify what else is getting in the way, and then figure out how we can get what's getting in the way out of the way. There's a lot of really interesting ground-up discussion going on about the need to harmonize form and character bylaws and zoning rules, so that way what's permissible on one side of a street is permissible on the other side of a street where there's a municipality that changes in between the two of them. Identifying how digitization can support the rapid approvals and review of permitting, or even just help people understand where garbage cans have to go, and if that gets in the way of a standardized design when they look at their lot in a planning view. So my team and colleagues across the ministry are turning to supporting standardization how we can, now that we have examples of standardized designs that work well. We're also working with colleagues and counterparts in other parts of government and alongside government. You may have heard at the Union of BC Municipalities convention this year that the Minister of State for Communities announced that some of the funding held by UBCM in relation to the local government development approvals process would be relaunched in January to support projects that would propose ways to support things like digitization and standardized designs. We're still waiting on the details of that to come out, but going back to the press release and the news information that came out, the basic idea is that there will be an opportunity coming up in the new year, most likely, for local governments to propose a project to support things of uptake like digitization of processes, implementation of standardized designs, reviews of bylaws to expedite approvals where they can, and that funding could be made available through that process. Keep your eyes out to UBCM as that work continues. I'm confident that there will be some news between now and January, or at least I'm hopeful for it, that could help catalyze some actual work to get this going. We're supporting local governments in terms of innovation and adoption. Cleo's team has created that local partners process where they ask local governments to take a look at some of the designs, take a look at some of their land, highlight where they would work, maybe review one or two of the designs up front and be able to say with confidence we could expedite permitting. All of these things my team at the ministry are very excited about and happy to support, whether it's our catalog, CMHC's catalog, or another catalog. And we're also trying to build out alongside our colleagues at the Building Permit Hub to identify how we can support a community of practice for people like the folks on this webinar, to share knowledge, share learnings, share experience in reviewing some of these applications up front to see how we can expedite approvals in some way or another. And then from there, we're also looking at standardization in new ways as we go from here. Our colleagues at BC Housing are embarking on a really exciting project called Digitally Accelerated Standardized Housing, which takes some of the principles of a catalog of standardized designs and applies it to mixed or multi-unit residential buildings, but can also be applied to Part 9 buildings the same way, with standardized components and standardized blueprints that incorporate planning and servicing and land use bylaws to know where things go. And that's also helping support some ground up standardization of bylaws and rules. This is exciting. We're continuing down this path in the same way that we're supporting uptake of the catalog for multiplexes where we can. Really, that's where I'm going to stop because I think that I've given you an overview of what we procured, why we procured it, and what we hope to accomplish in terms of future work. And I'm thrilled and excited to hear from Bryn and then the questions, Raymond. So I'm going to pass it back to you.
All right. Thank you, Kevin, for your presentation. I'm actually glad you mentioned about the LG DAP program. I believe there's $9 million being made available for local governments. So, and more details to come soon from
More details to
BBCM.
come, but from what I've seen so far, especially from that news release, the Minister of State announced, digitization, standardized designs, prefab, offsite construction, funding available for local governments willing to pitch projects in relation to that. Reach out to me. I'd love to hear what you guys are thinking about.
Excellent. All right, so we're now going to shift into the practitioner's perspective and panel dialogue. I want to ask all the panelists to turn on your cameras. Excellent. So yes, I've been monitoring the chat taking place in the chat box. I think this is the most activity I've seen this year. So what I'll do is I'll circulate the questions to our panelists after the webinar, and I'll ask them to provide written responses as appropriate, and we can post the responses on the PIBC website. So I'm now wanting to invite Bryn and Guy into the conversation. Let's start with you, Bryn. What's your reaction and thoughts about what you heard and what you think are some of the challenges and opportunities from your perspective as a builder?
Yeah, thanks. I think that the catalog is a great start on the process, and I think it's a really amazing kind of tool for planners and other people to kind of understand how missing middle housing could land in their community. We built the first laneway house in Vancouver 15 years ago, and we've gone through lots of iterations with the city of Vancouver on the zoning over the last 15 years. And in that process, I've also come to see that in my mind, the process, the zoning and the approvals process is more important than any one design. And so when I look at this, I'm like, okay, well, prefab is great, pre-approval is great. What I want is standardized zoning process, because when I build in Vancouver, it's different. If I go to try to do a laneway house in New Westminster, you have to have a development permit, which is absurd. If you go to Victoria, maybe it's capped at 600 square feet, which is equally absurd. And so there are kind of best practices that I think that are starting to come out in terms of how to write these zoning so that it's fairly simple and scalable. And I think that that's the big piece. And once you get that right, then the pre-approved pieces, the prefab, that can all kind of flow into that landscape of kind of adaptive zoning, but that's where we've been really focused.
Thank you, Bryn. And Guy, I'll also ask you your reactions and also perhaps what have you seen in your practice in regards to just generally speaking, the implementation of Bill 44, and maybe more specifically in consideration of the housing or standardized design catalogs.
Well, I mean, I don't know anything about designing houses, but I maybe I'll just pick up on what Bryn said, which is, I think what he was saying is sort of standardizing the regulatory framework. Maybe that's, I don't know if that's a paraphrasing accurately what Bryn's mentioning, but I mean, I have the good fortune in my work of reviewing zoning bylaws from, dozens of communities around the province. And, it's, you wouldn't believe how different they all are. And especially when, every single OCP I read says human scale, pedestrian friendly, transit oriented, mixed use, medium density development. So there seems like one policy goal across the province. And then there's 250 odd zoning bylaws. So, I don't have an opinion whether that's a bad or good thing. I'm just kind of reflecting on how it is remarkable that we all seem to want to get to the same place, but we're determined to do it in, 238 different ways, which I could see being frustrating for builders, who I'm not always sympathetic to.
Other panelists, any response? Bryn, Dan, Cleo, Kevin?
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to pop up my one slide there if that works. Let me see here. So these were when I was trying to boil down my thoughts to kind of 5 simple things, I think is just that simple approval process, killing the development permit. Like At least in Vancouver with multiplex, there's no neighbor notification. You don't have to go to council. There's no design guidelines. If you've got those things, we can't spend all of our time fighting over whether a building should exist and then fighting over what it looks like. We need to move to saying, how do we actually build it? And so getting rid of the DP, the neighbor notification is key. Having scalable zoning. When Vancouver adopted laneway houses, they made 60,000 lots eligible for laneway houses, but they permit about 600 per year. And so from my mind, having that 100-time factor, look how many of one thing you want to build in a year and make sure you've got zoned capacity for 100 times that. It doesn't mean it's all going to get built next year. It just means that's how you have an adaptive market and you're not just doing scarcity planning. I think that 2 pages for zoning, if you've got more than that, it's too much. If you've got less than that, it's going to cause problems because it's not clear enough. That seems to be the sweet spot, whether it's for a house or a fourplex or whatever. Try and fit it on 2 pages and leave some wiggle room. So hire somebody to put a real building concept on your lot, test your zoning. And if the typical building is 22 feet, then make your max height 23 feet. Leave some wiggle room so we're not fighting over 1 or 2 inches during the permit review process, because that can just drag things on for forever. And then some things, when especially with ADUs and multiplexes, things like parking, it's wildly different in every different place. When we look at the story of how this evolved in Vancouver, in the beginning there were garages. All the garages were converted to living space because of course they were. So then the city moved to carports, but they had very restrictive massing rules. So there was only ever room for one car parking spot. Now they've relaxed the design guidelines so that we can actually build over the top of open carports without counting it as FSR. And so what we're finding now is that the city took away the minimum zoning or parking requirement, but we are actually providing more parking now than we did before because of the flexibility in the design. And so if this alone, if I could get this approach, count garages as FSR, don't count carports, allow to be built over the top, if I could get that across the whole province, then we can start to scale these things up. And so these are the ways that I really, when I think about it, it's about how do we make this process scalable, because our business would not have been able to start if every laneway house had to have a development permit, or if it was only allowed in certain neighborhoods, or if it had to be micromanaged in terms of its design aesthetic. We had a business because it was simple and relatively straightforward and scalable. So that's what I'm hoping to see.
Thanks, Bryn. I'm glad you mentioned parking. Guy, if I recall correctly, maybe 2 webinars ago, we asked you to give a quick overview of the Bill 25 that was at that time recently introduced. And just wondering whether you can provide a quick sort of a reminder to the audience about the parking provision within Bill 25.
Give me 1 sec. Well, yeah, I mean, I think it's basically, well, we know that the Bill 44 came along and said you can't require parking for residential uses in transit-oriented areas, or maybe close to transit. I can't remember if I'm right about that. And then Bill 25, wait, I'm gonna just, let me look at this real quick, because I just have a note here that I'm bringing up. About parking said, oh yeah, right. So there's no, at least if my notes are not wrong, section 525 to the LGA now no parking requirements for Bill 44 or SMU units within this prescribed distances of bus stops. And then also Cabinet can now make regulations regarding the exercise of the remaining, I call it the recently eviscerated 525 authority, including making regulations about how you can exercise your parking authority for parking for small scale multi-unit housing that is not so close to transit. So no parking close to transit, no parking in transit oriented areas for residential uses. And then again, this cabinet authority to basically, further interfere if local governments aren't doing what cabinet wants, as far as I think the overall goal being reduce the amount of parking required and reduce the amount of regulations that tell people, what those parking spots have to look like and whatnot.
Thank you, Guy. Kevin, did you want to jump weigh in on this? As the provincial
Honestly,
rep?
no, because that comes from a different part of the ministry. But I would just pulled up the act, and I think Guy did the same analysis that I could do real quick. It is all about trying to reduce some of the pressures that parking creates and requirements of parking in lots to support development where we can.
Excellent. Cleo, your hand is up.
Get in there on the zoning discussion. So much like Guy, I get to review zoning bylaws from across the country, and the variety and variation of them is incredible. And I agree, most places have policies that say we want to enable a diversity of housing to meet the needs of our community. I think that the Bill 44 SMU legislation gave some really good parameters of what a standardized approach to low density zoning could look like. But the way that has been implemented, there's a huge variety out there. I've always been frustrated that it seems harder to build the type of housing that we say we want and need in our communities than the type of housing that we're not trying to encourage. So I would just say there should be no reason, to Dan's point, why a fourplex, which is now allowed in most zoning across the province, shouldn't be able to be built across jurisdictions, whether you are in numerous communities in the Okanagan or in Metro Vancouver and the 23 different jurisdictions there, or the 13 jurisdictions around Victoria. If we can start there and have gentle density and, these catalog homes or the BC catalog as an approach to just looking at on that gentle density scale, how we enable that housing in a more streamlined, predictable fashion, I think that will go a long way as a housing solution. And yeah, so standing a little bit on the soapbox, but also the catalog really gives us a window into where zoning is permissible and flexible and where it is not. And I'm happy to say that I'm working with jurisdictions that said, oh, Cleo, you know what? We love the catalog. We're going to come on as a local partner, but I've got to increase my height from 10 meters to 10.5. So we're going to bring forward that change, and then we're on board and we're going to be a catalog partner. So I almost see this as a vehicle to help incent that change across regions.
I'll just jump in and say I think that's absolutely the greatest thing about this is engaging with cities to see does their zoning work and how can it work better and how can they standardize it. Because we've been on the Burnaby Housing Library for a year now, along with the other practitioners, and it's a challenge because somebody comes and says, oh, I want one of these standardized ones, and we're like, well, let's look at your lot. Well, no, that doesn't fit. So I need to do something custom anyway. So as long as the process is fine, then we can go and do something custom. I can do a concept design in a pretty short period of time. Like we can do something custom, but as long as the zoning works, we can go and do it. So as long as if this housing catalog unlocks that zoning conversation, that's where the money is.
Thank you, Bryn. All right, maybe Dan, you can have the final word in this segment before we move over to audience questions.
So I'm thrilled that you're giving me the last word on this because I do not have to practice the diplomacy that CMHC and the government of British Columbia does. I think it is amazing that we are so worried about the cars when we're also talking about the trees and the housing affordability crisis. The last time I checked, we were not in a parking crisis, nor were we in a car crisis. So I think that is the first thing to consider. Second, if I was being more politically apt, I think this is an opportunity to rethink what we think about parking infrastructure in communities across Canada. There's a group based out of Ottawa that has, posited that in the world of autonomous vehicles, do we need parking directly on our single family lots? Could there be community parking centers where our cars can come to us in the not so distant future? But nonetheless, determining what private, and we won't get into private land today, but what I can do on my land and how much space needs to be reserved for cars is laughable. We're in a housing crisis.
Thank you, Dan. All right, I was a little bit premature with my call for the final word. The final word goes to Kevin.
Yeah, I'm gonna try. I've never been told really directly to be super diplomatic, so I appreciate Dan's energy. I'm a very lucky person where I don't actually have a car and I live in a part of a city where I don't need one. So I really understand the livable communities that come up from that. But at the same time, I also know from colleagues across the province that there are parts of the province where you need a car just to do your daily necessities. And so there's a balancing point depending on the community. What I wanted to pick up though was a comment that Bryn made about zoning and what I'm seeing in the chat about standardized zoning. I've got colleagues in another branch of government that are working on the digitization project as we're digitizing bylaws to understand zoning. And I've talked to folks like Michael Epp at Metro Van, and sometimes when you pull up zoning bylaws in local governments and you think it's clear, but it references a zoning bylaw from 2014, which references a zoning bylaw from 2002, which references a zoning bylaw from 1862, it can be really hard to actually understand what the zoning is. So one of the key steps that we're taking in the province is digitizing the zoning bylaws so that if at the very least you can pick a plot of land and know what zone applies to it, what the heights are, what the setbacks are, so that way you can visualize it. Step one. Step two is as local governments are digitizing their bylaws so we actually know what the zoning is, they're starting to see some of the scenarios where there's weird requirements that have crept in through years and years of bylaw amendments, and we're getting a little bit of ground up standardization. That's exciting to see as people are being faced with their own zoning bylaws and going, wow, we can simplify this really dramatically. We shouldn't need to rezone to add 2 inches of height to support a standardized design. And so there's work that's coming up ground up to make that happen. And it starts with digitization and understanding the bylaws. So that work's ongoing. It's exciting. LGDAP funding should be available for it if your local government wants to do it. Just want to make a pitch for that.
Awesome. Thank you, Kevin. Alrighty, I think the panel's fully warmed up. So we're going to move over to the audience questions. But before we do that, I just want to give a quick plug about a special lunch and learn that PIBC is hosting next Thursday, December 18th. As I mentioned at the outset, Bill M216, Professional Reliance Act, was introduced in the legislature in October and received second reading in November. The bill now sits with this is a long one, Select Standing Committee on Private Bills and Private Members' Bills. If you haven't been following Bill M216, here's your chance to catch up. So next Thursday, this special lunch and learn, we have on deck Kenna Youngman, PIBC Board President, Narissa Chadwick, PIBC Board President-elect, and Deborah Jensen, Chair of the RPP Regulation Subcommittee, and our friend, Guy Patterson, will also be on the panel. So feel free to register. Registration is free, and I think we have over 200 registrations so far. So thank you for your interest. Alrighty, let's move on to the audience questions. Thank you for submitting. I think we received over 24 questions related to standardized designs and standardized rules and regulations. So let's go to the first question. I see that in a chat box, my former colleagues at Metro Vancouver are burning up that part of the webinar. So let's jump to one of their questions about tree retention. With the context being that urban forests are crucial for community resilience. How can we ensure housing design standards leave enough space for trees on site? Who wants to take this on? Cleo? Kevin?
I can go for it.
All right.
So, great question. I think that Victoria approached this really well in their missing middle housing and zoning. Essentially, they said that there are going to be trade-offs. They acknowledged it. If you want to see housing, parking, and green space, permeability, and trees on site, likely it's going to be hard to get all three. So you're going to make choices about the housing, the green space, and vehicle parking. What I will say though is that in the catalog, designs. We did a study on general lot sizes across Canada and in regions. We are aiming for a 40 to 50% lot coverage with these homes, as well as 40% average permeability. So we're meeting most zoning regulations and conditions, whether you were building a fourplex or a single detached home. So I would just say that there does need to be balance, but I think that there is pragmatic way that we can approach this and understand those trade-offs and make good decisions. Thanks.
Thank you, Cleo. Kevin, did you want to jump in here?
No, I think Cleo hit it on the head. Like there's going to be trade-offs, and the designs that we procured, they didn't come with things like landscape designs or things like that, but it's a balancing point question. We've got multiple lot sizes across the province, no standard lot, no standard location of some of these things, and it requires a little bit of careful consideration.
All right. Staying with you, Kevin, I wanted to ask you about, oh, sorry, Guy.
Well, if you want to stay with Kevin, he can finish his thoughts, but I got one small point.
No, go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, I just couldn't resist. There's a great legal moment here, but there's a rule in the community charter that says a tree bylaw doesn't apply to the extent it restricts permitted uses and densities on the site. So just for local governments, be careful if you're adding a bunch of extra permitted uses and densities. Those uses and densities will trump your tree bylaw basically, unless you compensate or issue a development variance permit. So the legislation basically says development beats trees. So that's just a point about the community charter.
Thank you, Guy. Kevin, just staying on with the sort of the theme of the environment, there was a question in the chat box about what level of zero carbon step code do the standardized designs meet?
Yeah, and it's a good question. What I can answer is about the energy step code. They meet step 4 based on the initial analysis, but I think that the zero carbon step code will depend on the facings and the claddings and a whole bunch of other choices in the building that you come up with. So that would require a little bit of examination. We've provided a bunch of different options in initial review about claddings, fenestration options in the catalog to try to help with some of those considerations.
Dan?
I'm raising my hand, but really what I'm going to do is call on Bryn, because my understanding, it's more about the systems that are employed within the envelope itself as opposed to those. So as long as you're running all electric, or if you're running dual fuel and it's a backup for gas, you should be able to still hit the higher levels of the carbon code. But Bryn, confirm if I'm wrong there.
Honestly, we do all electric buildings all the time, so I've never really looked at it that closely. But I do think that we should be pushing to electrify to the extent possible, as a priority as part of any of this. So yeah.
Yeah, and my brain went to embodied carbon for some ridiculous reason, but Dan's 100% correct. Like, it would depend on the systems if you've got a dual fuel
Yeah, I
or
don't think
all
embodied
electric.
carbon is part of it yet. It's
No,
just starting to become
it's
part
not.
of City of Vancouver's density bonus program
Yeah,
just
we're
this
at
year.
measure only right now, so yeah.
All righty. I think this question is directed to Bryn, and maybe Dan, you can jump in as well. Can we put a quantum on how much standardization really plays in terms of addressing the cost of delivering housing?
Well, I'd say that most of these designs are still going to have to be customized in terms of site, sewer, foundations. The building permit costs are going to be about the same. You're saving potentially about on the schematic design phase. So on a laneway house, our package might be $40,000 for design and all the consultants. So 20 grand is that of the actual design, and maybe half of that's, call it 10 grand. But if what I find with clients is when they come to me with a standardized design, I say it usually lasts about 5 minutes. Because as soon as we put it on that site and they start talking about what they want, we end up going off in tangents, and the design gets customized. Now, I understand we're a design-focused business, so we're very different than, say, Joe Builder somewhere remote where there's not a design community and they want to just produce something. But that's where we keep coming back to the simplified zoning approval, because if we want to design around a tree on a slope in a weird situation, let's do something custom, but still have a quick approval process.
Yeah, so I'll jump in and add to that. And I think you've got to zoom out and have a little bit more of a long range view on this. So what you heard from Kevin and Cleo is that we love all standardized designs of all types. And when you tour places that are more evolved in their prefab, so when I was in Germany and Austria last year touring this sector, you actually would have residential home builders that say, we have our standardized design A, we have standardized design B, we have it in light and dark color palettes. And if you like that, great. And if not, there's another builder for you somewhere else in the community. I think where we should be thinking about how we get to faster approvals is a variety of builders with their own standardized designs, because they know the community zoning, they know the zoning bylaw, they know the regulations, so that they can get their own standardized designs fast tracked for approval, so that if Bryn has 4 designs, he knows that there's a pathway that gets his shovels in the ground faster. I think that's where we eventually need to go to really see this thing pick up.
Mm-hmm. And just picking up on that, from your perspective, given that tech catalogs are out there right now, is there a sort of a housing form that's most suitable to consider for standardization?
There is, so I'm going to give a different answer. So first off, no is the short answer. I think what I will say as a longer answer, though, is that between LGDAP and Build Canada Homes, there is a massive opportunity for local governments to partner with a nonprofit like, I don't know, theoretically Small Housing BC, to do some demo cases and to showcase some of these standardized designs. If the community can come with land to de-risk for a builder, we bring a builder that is looking to learn and transition to prefab, and we can provide open houses so that the community can walk through these houses and see how they work and operate in Coldstream, in Lake Country, in Burnaby, in Chilliwack. We are here to put together that application to Build Canada Homes. So if you want to be a part of that solution and see a wide variety of these deployed across British Columbia, Small Housing's here to support.
Bryn, did you want to jump in?
Oh, well, I think that the missing middle stuff is fantastic, but I think if you're in anywhere where a tear down single family house costs more than $1 million, then the land value supports small apartment buildings. And that's where we really need to be going next, is sort of standardized small lot apartment buildings. I know that's going to freak out a lot of planners across this because we're just adapting to duplexes, but ultimately that is what needs to happen. And I think especially with single stair types with small footprints, that's what I hope to see unfold over the next couple of years.
Cleo?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that we're seeing some promise in the repeatability, right? So my Vancouver example of a test case, is there, some efficiencies in repeating the same design in a number of different places, which again harkens back to the original catalog. So whether it's looking at ADUs, row housing, fourplexes, we think and we hope that there is some cost and time savings in that as well. And our local partners have said, the more of these applications we get in, the quicker that we will be able to permit them as well. And I'll just say to a question in the chat about how many have been built. So we just released the technical drawings in October. But since then, the traffic to our site has been pretty incredible. We've had over 30,000 downloads in the last month and a half. So we think that's pretty promising. And yeah, stay tuned. We hope to see some on the ground soon.
Excellent. So we mentioned parking, but thinking aside from the standardized designs, what are other cost-effective ways to trim the costs during construction without compromising quality? Maybe this is a question for you, Bryn.
Yeah, it's fairly expensive to build even anything basic these days. And so I think it is a challenge. The thing I struggle with is that our design fee is a pretty tiny piece of the overall project cost. When you look at construction, servicing, permit fees, DC development charges, our design fee is this little piece. So I don't think that carving that out is really going to do much for affordability. I think that we really need to look at different housing types like small apartment buildings if we want to make a dent on this. But I do think that this is a process where we are learning through doing. So all of the catalog work is awesome. And I think the engagement with the municipalities is awesome. I think once local builders build one and then try to repeat something, there will be things that emerge locally that make sense locally that start to have economies of scale. In Vancouver, we've been optimizing lane houses over 15 years. Like this isn't going to just instantly happen in 1 year. We're starting a process, and I think we're off to a good start, but it's got to unfold.
Thank you. I think I sort of know the answer to this question, but I'll ask anyways to Kevin and Cleo. Could the standardized designs incorporate green infrastructure, e.g., green roofs, rain gardens?
They would likely need to be a little bit worked over to incorporate some of those elements. There's a lot of green friendly, like they meet step code 4 for the energy step code right now in terms of the design elements that are in them. But when you get into things like green roofs, you sometimes need to do special work to water permeability changes and load calculations and things like that. So they're not, I mean, the advantage of a standardized design is that it's quickly approvable because it doesn't need double checking of all of those customizations. I've got a colleague in the building industry who like adds $50,000 for every corner he sees inserted into a design. And so changing up the standardized design to include new elements would mean that you are no longer using a standardized design. Future iterations of catalogs or future designs, or even standardized designs from builders like Bryn that incorporate green roofs. Let's get them standardized, let's get them approved, and then let's make the processes work around them so that way they can be rapidly implemented.
Thank you. So the next question, I'll maybe ask Guy to also weigh in. And there was also a question in the chat box about the potential liability issues related to the BC building code and local governments accepting the standardized designs at the building permit stage.
Well, I mean, generally the law in Canada is if a local government requires compliance with the building code to get a building permit and then issues a building permit despite non-compliance with the code, the local government has a problem. But provided that local governments don't issue building permits unless these standardized designs meet the code, then I don't see any liability issues.
So Kevin and Cleo, do your standardized designs currently meet the BC building code?
Want to go first, Cleo, or?
Yeah, so these were all designed, like I said, for our 7 different chapters across Canada. So they comply with local code regulations, different jurisdictional nuances, climate zones, and have all been with architects and engineers on the project. So yes, they meet all the current standards and go beyond in some cases, as I've said. So no concerns there. And because it is an online tool now and not the previous printed versions, we can update as needed as things change over time.
And I'll say the same for us. With a couple of important provisos, the designs are compliant with the BC Building Code. They go above and beyond in some cases. I think one of them is even compliant with the adaptability provisions that are in the code in terms of travel distances and turning radiuses, just to be fully comprehensive, even though those don't apply to Part 9 buildings in the same way. The important proviso, though, is that we're a really big province. It's going from far north down to the south. and that snow loads and seismic zones change depending on where you go. So there is an expectation that when you pick up one of the designs, you do have someone who's capable of providing an assessment on them, because you might need to change fenestration rules in one place or another, depending on the Revit file itself to comply with the local characteristics. And then you have to have someone do the foundation or the ground design for you to comply with the local characteristics. So the design from foundation up complies with the code, with the proviso that it just needs to be customized in case you're in a place that gets earthquake and snow and wind.
Thank you. Alrighty, I think the next question should be fun. We get to name names. So who's doing, in terms of facilitating the standardized designs and regulations successfully at the municipal level? And who's starting to figure this out? Who wants to take this one? Bryn?
Oh,
May I
I've got a lot
suggest
of
you?
people to complain about, but I don't know who's doing a good job with the standardized.
I'll jump in
like I
if
said, yeah, go for it, Dan.
Cleo, your experience and expertise is far more vast than mine, but I want to give a shout out to my hometown of Kelowna, that even with their RU7 zone in the initial trial phase of Plex redevelopment, saw redevelopment rates of 20% over 4 or 5 years. With the processes that they've implemented, they can get to BP for standardized design within 10 business days. But I'm very happy to hear from Cleo where else we should be directing our research and attention to.
Yeah, so there was a question on zoning, and like I've said, this is early days for the catalogs, right? And this response, but our local partners, I will highlight Halifax, that commits to issuing a building permit for standardized design within 2 weeks. Kitchener, and this is also telling you where some great zoning exists, because I know that was asked a lot as well. Kitchener, Ontario, doing some great things in this space, really good zoning. They're also a local partner. Whitehorse has some great zoning. So a shout out to Whitehorse, and of course Edmonton. They have been active in the gentle density space for a long time. And then locally, I will say Duncan has a really great bylaw, and Bryn, the low density zone, is 2 pages, so it meets your criteria. But also, Burnaby's zoning bylaw is great too. I know that there are some potential changes coming to that zoning bylaw that we're all watching closely, but it's still a really good zoning bylaw. So yeah, those are kind of my top 5 across the country.
Excellent. Thank you, Cleo. Dan, this question is for you. You mentioned in your presentation that Small Housing BC is offering a number of training opportunities, including builders workshops coming up soon. Is Small Housing BC also planning to offer any other sort of standardized zoning or development permit area guidelines to local governments?
Yeah, for sure. We're definitely a willing and able partner on all this great LGDAP funding that is being promoted. We've done this work in communities both in British Columbia and beyond for about a year now. So for everything from helping to like a review that can help boost infill uptake, as well as, ensuring communities will be able to maximize what they can do with Build Canada homes when we talk about modern methods of construction, and general zoning bylaw reviews, particularly with Bill 25. We're here to support all of it, in addition to the sector enablement work that I focus on.
Excellent. And then we did receive a number of questions related to the I think the social dimension of standardized housing designs, whether related to ensuring seniors' ability to age at home, ensuring that these designs and the housing that's built also benefit lower income households. Yeah, just want to open it up for some thoughts and reflections about the different dimensions of missing middle housing.
I'll start this off, and I think it's one of the things. Like, there was a couple of comments in the chat, and unfortunately, I can't interact as much as I usually love to, about whether this housing is actually affordable. And I mean, on one hand, new housing is never going to be affordable, but it does enable filtering. And at the same time, if you are going to enable affordable housing, we have to consider the typical client who is enabling gentle density and missing middle. And largely, that is multi-generational families who have secured a large amount of land equity in their previously single family zoned land. And look, we have two different board members with 4 generations of housing living within cooperatively within a piece of what was once single family zoned land. So I think there is an opportunity to get affordable rental, affordable ownership by spreading out the land cost, and even easier if you have a significant amount of equity. And oftentimes that part of the conversation goes ignored. And I think it's important to consider.
Thank you. All righty, I think we're near the end of our questions submitted from the registrants. So what I'll ask is if we can just go around the horn, everyone, to maybe offer your final thoughts, at least for today, about the topic of standardized designs and standardized rules to enable more small-scale multi-unit housing. So I'll just go to the top of my screen here. Bryn.
Yeah, I would just say focus on the zoning. I think that's where so much of this is unlocked. And I think once we get through the missing middle housing, then focus on doing the same thing. I always say it's the mansion test. The permitting, the housing we actually need should be as easy as it is getting a building permit for a mansion. And there's far too many of these municipalities where you fail that test. So fix that, please. Thanks.
Thanks, Bryn. All right, next up, Kevin.
Yeah, thanks so much, Raymond. It's been such a pleasure. I love seeing the chat, and I would invite anyone with questions about how the province can support or catalyze discussions, reach out to me, firstname.lastname@gov.bc.ca. I will promise to try to get back to you. Beyond that, the magic with standardized designs and standardized rules is that we reduce the delays and the costs. And if we can reduce the time that it takes to get a permit, and if we can reduce the restrictions that go into how we design buildings to even fit into lots in the first place, we can try to increase supply, spread out the housing continuum, make options for rental, for multi-generational living on a single lot, multiple dwelling units, things like that. Standardization is one way to do it, and it makes it faster where it can. And I'm thrilled to just be part of these conversations, thrilled to work with Cleo and connect with Dan and Bryn and everyone to keep these conversations going and seeing what we can do to get out of the way and help people get things done.
Thank you, Kevin. Over to you, Dan.
Yeah, I think that it's important to remember that although this fight has been going on for quite some time, that we're still really just at the beginning of providing solutions that begin to address the problem. And it's easy to be impatient when you see the cost of housing as what it is, but we have to remember that standardized designs were initially introduced a year ago by the BC government, months ago by CMHC. We are still in our early phases of adoption. And if I'm going to get on my beyond the connect with me, Dan at smallhousingbc.org, find me on LinkedIn piece. If I'm going to get on my old man yells at cloud portion for local governments, get your development cost charges to be at the lot, not at the unit. This will allow you to incentivize more gentle density. If you're building a mansion, you're paying $50,000 in DCCs per lot. If you did 6 units, you're paying $300,000. You're actively disincentivizing gentle density if your DCCs are at a per unit basis. Thank you for getting on my soapbox.
All right, thanks, Dan. All right, Cleo.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. It was very engaging to watch the chat. I'm also sorry I couldn't respond to a number of those, but thank you for coming. Thank you for your interest, all the work you do out there in trying to build stronger, healthier, more affordable communities across the province and across Canada. As has been said, this is one solution of many that we need. And it's an exciting space to be in. I'm also really grateful for the panel and engaging with all of you. It's nice to see some friendly faces and names in the chat as well. So yeah, thanks PIBC. Thank you everyone for coming, and thanks to my panelist friends. Back to you, Raymond.
Thank you,
And
Cleo.
reach out to me too. If you are a local government that wants to be a local partner, we are happy to chat with you. So please reach out.
Thank you, Cleo. All right, Guy, you get the last word.
Oh, I mean, I guess for me, from my perspective as a lawyer, what's fascinating about sort of a lot of this is just how I think the quest to unlock more housing supply is creating some interesting tensions between, the appropriate role of the province and that of the local governments. And I think it seems like maybe there's like a little bit of there's sort of some growing pains in figuring out how the regulatory landscape is going to kind of unfold. But I'm just kind of interested to see how, again, as between the province and municipalities, how we kind of figure out like who's best placed to do what kind of regulating.
Thank you, Guy. Wise words for everyone. So thank you, everyone on the panel for playing ball today. And thank you to the audience for your engagement. So we'll be posting the presentations and also this recording on the PIBC webpage later this week. And please stay tuned for more PLN offerings in 2026. And also another reminder, please sign up if you're interested for next Thursday's Lunch and Learn on Bill M216. Thank you and happy holidays.